The sandstorm had not yet reached its fury, but it rolled over the horizon like a bruised and rising tide, cloaking the mountains in a veil of dust. A crimson sun hung low in the sky, casting an eerie gold over the dunes, and at the heart of the storm-watching citadel, the Empress seated. She stood motionless at the edge of the chamber balcony, draped in heavy bronze robes that clinked faintly when she moved. Her eyes, narrow and sharp like obsidian blades, surveyed the hazy distance as if it might yield her daughter back to her by sheer will. The escort was found torn apart. No bodies, save for a few remains, the captain said carefully behind her, bowing low. "And Viraya?" the Empress asked. The single word struck the silence like a gong. He did not answer quickly enough. "Vanished," he finally murmured. The Empress turned slowly, her expression carved from fury and disbelief. She was surrounded by 20 of my finest guards. "You expect me to believe my daughter was simply taken? She could have fled. Or the raiders." Silence. Her voice did not rise, but the guards around her flinched. "Send search riders. Triple the patrols. Lock the ports. I want her found. I want the sand turned inside out if you must." The captain nodded and departed, his boots echoing down the marble. Alone again, the Empress let one hand curl into the stone of the balcony rail. She had ruled this empire with fire and blade. None had dared challenge her, not in 20 years. Yet now her daughter, her only heir, was gone, far beyond the city's reach. The desert stretched out like a merciless ocean. In its depths, beneath blistering heat and skies the color of molten copper, a lone figure moved through the dunes. Cale stumbled. One hand clutched against his ribs, the other holding a crude staff fashioned from the remains of a broken banner. His clothing was torn, slave wraps soaked with sweat and dust. Shackles still clung to one wrist, the iron half melted and broken during his escape from the labor pits of Vareth. The desert wasn't kind to anyone, least of all escaped human slaves. His lungs burned with every breath, but it wasn't the heat that stopped him. It was a shape, barely visible, half buried in the sand. He dropped to his knees beside the body. At first, he thought it was already dead. Pale cloth wrapped around a form far too still. Hands curled in the telltale twitch of final agony. But when he brushed sand from the face, he froze. Blue, her skin was deep cerulean, smooth as painted glass beneath the grit. Her hair, a spill of braided black cords, fanned across the dunes like ink, and she was breathing, shallow, rattling breaths that caught in her throat, as if each one might be the last. Cale knew what she was immediately. Royal. No one else wore armor etched in the old sigils of the House of Flame. No one else had that bearing. Even half-dead and unconscious. He cursed under his breath and looked around. The desert was silent. For now. "You're supposed to be dead," he muttered. Would have made this simpler. He pulled water from his flask, lips parched and throat raw. He hesitated, then lifted her head gently and poured a few drops past her lips. She choked, coughed weakly, but her eyes fluttered open. Golden irises, narrow pupils. Recognition dawned slowly, followed by fear. "You," she rasped. "Yeah," Cale said. "Human. Slave. Scum. Pick your insult." She tried to rise. Failed. Her strength was gone. "I found you out here," he added. "You want to live. You don't fight me." He waited for the protest, the shriek, the order to kneel, but none came. Her eyes searched his face, then the desolation around them, then her torn cloak. "Somewhere near the bones of the dead," he said. "Couple days' walk east of Vareth. You're lucky the vultures didn't get you first." She swallowed with difficulty. "I was ambushed. We didn't see them coming." "Raider clans, probably. Or your own nobles. Desert doesn't care." He stood and offered a hand. After a moment, she took it. They moved slowly. She leaned on him, her steps dragging through the sand. Neither spoke for hours. When night fell, the air turned cold and bitter. Cale built a fire from dried roots and thorns, setting it in a shallow rock pit. She sat opposite, silent, studying him with the gaze of someone used to seeing from above. "You don't speak like a slave," she said at last. I don't feel like one, he answered. Not out here. You knew who I was. I did. And you didn't kill me. Or sell me. Why? He stared into the flames. Maybe I'm too tired. Maybe I want to see if royalty bleeds the same as the rest of us. A pause. You hate us. Shouldn't I? He didn't expect her to respond. But after a while, she said, yes. He looked at her then. Really looked. She wasn't what he'd imagined royalty to be. She didn't wear cruelty like a crown. She was proud, certainly, but not hardened in the way of tyrants. There was pain in her eyes. Loss, maybe, or fear. My name is Viraya, she said. I know, he replied. I'm Kale. They didn't shake hands, didn't smile, but the desert accepted the words like a quiet vow. In the distance, beyond the firelight, a howl rose. Not wind, not beast, something else. Kale tensed. They'll come for you, he said. Your mother's soldiers. Maybe worse. They think I'm dead, she whispered. Or taken. He glanced at her. Which would you prefer? I don't know. Sleep was fitful. The wind screamed in bursts, and the fire sputtered low. Kale kept watch while she drifted in and out of dreams, her lips murmuring words in an ancient tongue. Once she cried out. He didn't wake her. By morning, a new storm loomed, this one more violent, with coils of red dust and lightning crawling across the sky. They had no shelter. They walked again, slower now, Viraya leaning heavily on Kale. The storm overtook them by midday. Kale wrapped her in a length of torn cloth and guided her toward the canyon paths where the winds broke slightly. And there, in the storm's eye, they came face to face with a hunting party. 6 figures, mounted on lean, scaled beasts, armor bearing the sun crest of the Empress. Viraya staggered forward. I'm here, she called. But they did not cheer. They raised weapons. That's her. The girl's alive, one barked. And she's with the human, another snarled. Kale moved instinctively, pulling her behind him as spears were drawn. I saved her, he shouted. She was dying in the sands. She's been kidnapped, the lead rider growled. Stand aside, slave. Viraya stepped forward, weak but furious. He didn't take me. He rescued me. The soldiers hesitated. One lowered his weapon, uncertain. The leader did not. The Empress gave orders. Any human caught beyond the ring is to be executed. No, Viraya shouted. He's under my protection. But the rider lunged. Kale met him head on. No armor, no blade, just instinct and rage. Sand exploded around them as the two collided, and the storm swallowed everything in red and gold. The moment lingered, suspended in violence and dust, as if the desert itself held its breath. Kale's knuckles were raw, split where they had struck armor, but the rider no longer moved. His scaled beast lay shrieking in the sand, twisted and lamed from the impact. Kale breathed hard, vision blurred, the scent of blood and storm-thrashed air thick in his lungs. Around him, the remaining soldiers held their ground, uncertain, caught between the oaths they'd sworn and the impossible scene before them. An Empress's daughter defending a human with her body. Lay down your weapons, Viraya said, voice hoarse but unshaken. Now. The second rider raised a spear as if in reflex, but she stepped in front of Kale before Kale could react. Her hand, pale blue and trembling, lifted high. Light shimmered at her fingertips, a command gesture of nobility, not to be questioned in the imperial hierarchy. I invoke blood right, she said. He saved my life. By law, I owe him protection. The word struck the soldiers like thunder. Even through the whipping storm, Kale could see it, the doubt, the disbelief. No one invoked blood right. It was an ancient law, buried beneath centuries of power games and political posturing. But it was real and it could not be denied. The leader dismounted, his movement stiff. You dishonor the crown, my lady. You stand between us and a fugitive. Is that what we call all survivors now? She asked. Or just the ones who don't bow? Kale watched her, wary. This wasn't the same Viraya he had dragged from the sand a day ago. Something in her spine had straightened, some fire kindled beneath the bruises. She wasn't pretending. She was fighting. The man lowered his eyes. We will escort you back. The Empress would decide the slave's fate. Virea shook her head. You'll escort both of us, unharmed, or I will walk alone into the storm and let it tell her how you left me. The soldiers exchanged glances. Finally, the leader gestured, curt and resigned. Very well, but know this, human. You may have delayed death. You have not escaped it. Kale said nothing. He helped Virea onto the beast's saddle, then mounted behind her, ignoring the way the soldiers avoided looking at him. The desert moved around them, thick with sand and heat, and Kale kept his eyes on the horizon. He knew what awaited them was worse than any storm. It took 2 days to reach the capital. The domes of blackened gold and jagged towers rose from the sand like obsidian thorns, framed against the blood-orange sky. Kale had seen it before from far, and only as a prisoner, dragged in chains to the mines beneath its shadow. Now, he returned as something else entirely. Not yet free, not yet condemned, but visible. When they entered through the outer gates, the guards stopped them. Virea dismounted without aid, jaw set, movements defiant despite her weariness. I will see my mother at once, she ordered. A servant was sent scurrying into the palace. Moments passed, tense and silent. Then the inner doors opened, and the court came into view. Kale walked beside her as they entered. He felt the weight of eyes, noble, indifferent, disgusted. The court was dressed in burnished silks and jewel-toned robes, every figure an echo of wealth and war. They parted like water as Virea stepped into the hall, her presence an unexpected storm. At the throne center, surrounded by torchlight and flanked by stone lions, sat the Empress. She had not changed from the image in Kale's memory. Tall, lean, her skin a deeper shade of sapphire, her expression ageless. Her eyes locked onto her daughter, then narrowed as they found Kale. Virea knelt. I return, mother. The Empress rose. You return with filth at your side. He saved me. Is that what you call it? Her voice was quiet, deadly. I hear he fought my soldiers. To protect me, the Empress stepped forward, gaze fixed. Do you understand what he is? He's a man. He's a slave. Not anymore. The hall shuddered with tension. No one dared speak. Kale remained still, jaw clenched, refusing to look down. The Empress's voice softened, but it was no less cold. You speak of blood right. I should strip you of your name for invoking it. Then do it, Virea said, but I will not repay loyalty with silence. Kale met the Empress's eyes. For a moment, the room blurred away. He saw something there, not just rage, but confusion, loss. A mother who had ruled too long with fear, now confronted with something she could not control. Finally, the Empress turned. Take him to the lower quarters, she said. Not the pits. Not yet. And me? Virea asked. You'll remain in the sky chambers under guard. You may thank this creature for that mercy. The guards moved quickly. Kale did not resist. As they took him down winding halls lit by fire and gemstone lanterns, he felt Virea's eyes on his back until the last turn. The chamber they gave him was small, barely more than a stone cell, but it had a cot, water, even a window. He sat for a long time, silent, watching the light crawl across the walls. That night, he dreamed of the mines, of chains, of screams echoing through dark tunnels. But he also dreamed of Virea, standing before him in the storm, hair wild, voice steady. He didn't know what it meant. The next morning, the door creaked open. It was not a guard. It was her. She slipped inside quickly, cloaked in gray, hair tucked beneath a hood. She looked paler now, but more determined. They think I'm being watched, she whispered. But I bribed the shift keeper. I needed to see you. Kale stood. Why? Because this doesn't end here. My mother is letting you live. For now. But she'll find a way to erase this. She'll wait until it's quiet. Then you'll vanish. I figured. I want to stop it. Kale's brow furrowed. Why? Virea hesitated. Because if we let fear rule us, we're already dead. And because I owe you more than a law can repay. He studied her. You're not like them. No, but I still am one of them. which means I have power they don't expect me to use. He shook his head. You'd risk your place. Your crown. She smiled faintly. Maybe the crown needs breaking. A silence settled between them. The wind outside howled against the walls, and somewhere far above, a bell tolled midnight. Vireo reached into her cloak and pulled out a carved stone, a calm sigil, engraved with the seal of the inner chamber. This will open the servant tunnels beneath the palace, she said. If anything happens, if they come for you, don't wait. Kale took it. Their fingers brushed. For a moment, the world stilled again. She turned to go. I don't know how this ends, she said. Neither do I, he replied. But I think we just started something. The door closed softly behind her. In the silence that followed, Kale looked down at the stone, then out the window, where lightning lit the horizon. The storm was coming again. Kale moved like a shadow through the palace's underbelly, the carved stone gripped in one hand and a stolen blade sheathed beneath his tunic. The sigil Vireo had given him worked precisely as promised. Doors opened with the softest hum of energy, and passageways lit for only seconds before fading back to darkness. She had memorized the routes herself, traced them during her years of careful rebellion. And now he followed them like scripture. Every step took him closer to the truth neither of them had dared say aloud. He wasn't just being hidden. He was being watched, prepared, removed from sight until the Empress could erase the inconvenience of his survival. The sky above the palace cracked at the threat of rain, rare, violent, brief. It always came before something broke. Kale didn't know exactly where the Empress's war council gathered, but he knew Vireo would be there. She had told him the summit was a cover, a meeting of nobles convened to decide border disputes. But beneath that veneer lay the real discussion. What to do about the growing unrest in the outer provinces. Whispers had spread like plague, of an escaped human defying a royal guard, of an empress's daughter invoking ancient rights in his defense. It wasn't just scandal. It was instability. In the servant corridors above the council chamber, Kale crouched beside a grate and listened. He must be dealt with, said a voice sharp with authority. The longer he remains within the walls, the more emboldened the lower class becomes. Another answered, older, wearier. To kill him now would dishonor your daughter's claim. Blood, right as law. There are ways to make things appear natural, the Empress replied. Her voice was calm, but Kale heard the steel underneath. A tragic accident, a misstep. The desert takes many. And if Vireo resists, ask the first. She is still my daughter. Kale's grip on the grate tightened until his knuckles blanched. He expected betrayal. But hearing it framed so coolly, it hardened something inside him. He wasn't just a pawn anymore. He was a threat, and threats were eliminated. A whisper of movement behind him. Kale spun, blade drawn, but the figure raised her hands quickly. Easy, said Vireo, breath short. It's me. He lowered the blade, but his expression stayed taut. They want me dead. I know, she said. They're building a narrative. That you were unstable. That you escaped your quarters and attacked a guard. Then maybe I should. No, she snapped. You vanish now and the Empress wins. She controls the story. But if you stay, if we make this public, there are still those who remember the old laws. You want to drag this into the court? I want to drag this into the light. Kale considered it. And risk their blades on my back? We're past risk, she said. We're in it. He studied her. She was different now. Less fire, more focus, like a flame shaped into a blade. What do you need from me? He asked. Your voice, she said. Your truth. Tomorrow, the court gathers for the binding ceremony. If you speak then, before the high nobles, they'll have no choice but to listen. At least long enough for the people to hear. They'll try to silence me. Then I'll speak beside you. Kale nodded, slow. So this is the moment. Vireo reached out, placed her hand on his. This is where we begin to take it back. The next day dawned in haze and wind. The binding ceremony was held beneath the dome of echoes, a vast coliseum of sound and sky, where every word spoken became amplified for the court. It was designed for reverence, for declarations of law and lineage. Today, it would carry rebellion. Kale walked to the center gates, flanked by two silent guards, Viraya just behind him, her cloak drawn tight. The nobles were already assembled, their seats ringed in obsidian and gold, faces unreadable. The Empress stood at the dais, adorned in royal armor, her eyes like twin shards of polished ice. The hall stilled as Kale stepped into view. Murmurs rippled. A human, unshackled, breathing. The Empress raised her hand. "Let it be recorded," she said, "that on this day, the court bears witness to an anomaly, a slave who has violated sacred ground." Kale stepped forward. "No, a man who followed law. The law your daughter invoked. You would have left her to die." Gasps. Shuffling. The Empress's voice cut through. "You speak out of turn." "I speak because no one else would," Kale said. "You've built your throne on silence. But silence breaks." Viraya stepped beside him. "He saved my life. Not for power. Not for position. Just because he could. And you call that dangerous?" The Empress moved down the steps, slow and controlled. "He is a symbol of disorder." "No," Viraya said. "He is a symbol of something older than your fear. Honor. Choice. Freedom." Kale turned to the assembly. "You know me, not my name, but my scars. You've seen them on 1,000 backs, and you've looked away." He pulled back his sleeve. The branding mark burned against the skin. "This is what your peace costs." A silence followed. Then, soft, from one of the upper rows, a single voice. "He speaks true." Heads turned. Another voice joined. Then another. The Empress's eyes darkened. She stepped forward. "Enough." Kale met her gaze. "You taught your people to fear truth, but they remember, and they are no longer afraid." The hall trembled, not with sound, but with shift, with recognition, with the weight of something lost being remembered. Then came the scream. A blade flew from the upper gallery, aimed not at Kale, but at Viraya. He moved without thought, intercepted. Pain blossomed across his side as steel bit into flesh. Viraya caught him as he stumbled. Blood ran hot and fast down his ribs. Guards surged. The assailant was tackled, unmasked, one of the Empress's personal guard. The Empress's face didn't change. Viraya rose, fury in her voice. "This is your justice? Cowards in shadow?" The Empress spoke, quiet and cold. He was acting alone. "No," said Kale, voice low but carrying. He was acting like all tyrants do, afraid. He fell to one knee, vision dimming. Viraya knelt beside him, holding him up as his breath caught in gasps. "You won't die," she whispered. "Not like this." Kale smiled, grim and faint. "Then let it mean something." As he fell into unconsciousness, he heard it again, not silence, but voices. The crowd, growing louder, rising into something unstoppable. The storm had arrived. Kale awoke to pain. Not the searing kind that brought clarity, but the dull, bone-deep ache that blurred edges and slowed time. The ceiling above him was etched with constellations, ancient and cracked. He was no longer in a cell, nor in the dome. The air smelled of incense and sterile herbs. He turned his head, gritting against a fire in his ribs. A healer sat beside him, her skin ash-gray, her eyes downcast. "You were lucky," she murmured. The blade missed a lung. Kale didn't feel lucky. His memory returned in fragments. The blade in flight, Viraya's scream, the crowd's uproar. He had fallen in blood and defiance. "Where is she?" he rasped. The healer shook her head. "She left this morning, summoned to the inner court." His heart beat harder. "Alone," she insisted. Kale swung his legs over the cot. The healer protested, but he ignored her. He stood, trembling, and found his clothes folded neatly by the wall, stained but intact. There was no blade, no sigil, just a man's weight, and what little strength remained. The corridors outside were quiet, too quiet. The palace no longer buzzed with the usual life of staff and courtiers. Whispers clung to the air like dust. Servants averted their eyes as he passed, but none stopped him. They had seen what he had done. More importantly, they had heard him. He reached the gates of the inner sanctum just as the doors began to close. Two guards stepped forward. You're not permitted. One began. Veraya's voice cut through. He is. She stood at the threshold, draped not in silk, but in ceremonial armor, silver-stitched and gleaming with stormlight. Her hair was braided back, her face calm but unyielding. She looked more like an heir than he had ever seen her. The guards moved aside. Inside, the Empress sat alone on the throne. The court had not gathered. There were no witnesses, no counsel, just mother, daughter, and the man they had both come to represent. Cale limped forward. Veraya did not meet his eyes, but her presence alone was enough. So, the Empress said, "You rise again." Cale said nothing. The Empress's gaze drifted to Veraya. "And you bring him here to what? Shame me further? Finish what you began in the dome." "No," Veraya said. "I bring him because truth doesn't end with a single speech." The Empress stood. She was taller than her daughter, still every inch a ruler, but there was something diminished in her posture, subtle but real. "You believe the people would rise for him?" she asked. "For you? You mistake noise for power." "They're not rising for us," Veraya replied. "They're rising because of what we refused to see, what we allowed." The Empress's jaw tightened. "They need order. They need justice." "And what would you know of justice, child?" The Empress descended the steps slowly. "You've been sheltered. You've never bled for this realm." "He bled for me," Veraya said, "and they saw it. You think this is about policy, about law, but it's not. It's about faith." She turned to Cale. "Tell her." Cale's throat was dry. His ribs screamed with each breath, but he spoke anyway. "I was taken at 13, branded, thrown into pits to mine until I could no longer stand. I've seen men buried alive for speaking. I've watched children disappear, all in the name of balance." The Empress's eyes did not waver. "I don't hate you," Cale said, "but I will not bow. Not anymore. You can kill me, but it won't end it. They've seen too much now. They remember." For a long moment, the Empress said nothing. Then she turned her back. "I should end this now. One command, and your rebellion collapses." "You're right," Veraya said. "If you want the last act of your reign to be slaughter, then do it. But understand it will be the last." The room grew colder. A wind stirred, though no windows were open. Outside, thunder rolled in from the horizon. "I built this empire," the Empress whispered, "brick by brick, sacrifice by sacrifice." Veraya's voice softened. "Then maybe it's time to rebuild it, not from fear, but from hope." The Empress turned. Her face was unreadable. "What do you propose?" Veraya stepped forward. "Free the humans, end the branding, return to the treaties our ancestors wrote before conquest rewrote history." Cale felt the weight of those words. It wasn't enough, not yet, but it was the start of something impossible. The Empress looked at him one last time. There was no warmth, no apology, but there was a glimmer, just a flicker of respect. "You are dangerous," she said. Cale met her gaze. "Only to tyrants." She closed her eyes. "Then, so be it. I will announce the repeal at dusk. You will both stand with me. Speak. Show them what new rule looks like." Veraya nodded. Cale said nothing. The words had already been spoken. The world had already begun to shift. That evening, the palace steps were lit with 1,000 flames. The people filled the square, packed into every street and level. Cale stood beside Veraya, bandage battered, but standing. The Empress stepped forward and addressed the crowd, her voice carrying without magic, without amplification, just the force of long rule. She announced change, not surrender, not apology, but transformation. Law would be rewritten, systems dissolved, power redistributed. When Cale spoke, the people listened. When Veraya spoke, they cheered. And when the Empress stepped back, no one called her coward. They called her wise. After the ceremony, as the fires burned into the night and the city sang, Cale stood at the edge of the palace balcony, watching. He didn't feel victorious, just steady. "Ho!" Veraya joined him. "It's not over," she said. "It never is. But it's begun." He nodded. You could still lose everything. She smiled. I already have. Now I get to build something new. They stood together in silence, watching the future rise like dawn from the ash of old empires. And far beyond, where desert met sky, the storm at last began to break.